Hey guys, can you hear me now?
Sounding good.
All right, excellent. I think it's 10 o'clock, so we'll start. Welcome to a meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization, consistent with the executive orders issued by Governor Baker for COVID-19. This meeting is being held virtually. All participants, your microphones should be muted until you're called on. When we do call on you, please state your name for the record so we can get it on the record. Also, board members, please note that you're an MPO member when you state your name. I will have a roll call for all votes. As I said, the staff will unmute you as they call your name so you can say yes or no or abstain. If you have a question, if you click on participants, you will see a list of all the participants. At the bottom of that is a button called raise hand. You can push that raise hand button. We will see it and we will try to call on you. If that doesn't work, you can use the chat room. And I believe if you're on the phone, you can dial, I think it's 999. I mean, star 9. I'm sorry, star 9. So I think that's it. So let's put up the, oh, good, thank you. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Rosine Foley of the MPO staff at rfoley@cgps.org or at 857-702-3704. Thanks. Okay, so the first item on the agenda are the introductions. As I said earlier, I am David Moeller. I represent Secretary of Policare. Staff will now call the roll for introductions. And then wait a minute, actually, this, please, other people will be more well at this than I. Please raise your hand so staff can find you in the list. MPO members. Go ahead, Jonathan, I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. MassDOT Highway.
Unmute John. You have to unmute John Bouchard. You guys have to unmute them, right?
I have to unmute them.
John. Unmute
John Bouchard here.
John Bouchard. Thank you, John. Anyone else from Mass DOT?
John Romano is here. There we go.
Okay,
John Romano, Mass DOT Highway.
thank you. MBTA?
Samantha Silverberg, MBTA.
Thank you. Massport? Okay. MAPC?
I'm sorry, Jonathan. Massport is here. Laura? My apologies.
Laura, I don't see her in the list.
Well, I think we can move on for now.
Okay. MAPC?
Eric Barassa is here, MAPC.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's wait a minute. Laura Gilmore has her hand raised. One of you needs to find her and unmute her so she can say she's here, please.
I did unmute her. She just didn't, may not be at the computer right now.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
MBTA Advisory Board?
MBTA Advisory Board, Brian Kane here.
Thank you. Regional Transportation Advisory Council?
Leonard Diggins, Advisory Council here.
Thank you. City of Boston, Boston Transportation Department? I believe Mr. Kazis is on the phone.
Yeah, here we go. We've got it. I'll talk to folks about just some suggestions about if I'm the only one having problems getting on, that it's got to be my deficiency with the instructions. But we're on. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. City of Boston, BPDA.
Hey, everybody. Jim Fitzgerald, BPDA, representing City of Boston.
Thank you. City of Everett.
Jay Monty, City of Everett.
Thank you. City of Newton.
David Koza, City of Newton, present.
Is that David Kozis? I couldn't hear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, David
Yeah,
Koza.
I heard him, Jonathan.
Thank you. Town of Arlington.
This is Daniel Amisted's Town of Arlington, at-large town member, MPO member.
Thank you. Town of Lexington.
Sheila Page, Town of Lexington is here.
Thank you. Inner Core, Somerville.
Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Joe Curtatone in the Inner Core here.
Thank you. Magic, Acton. Magic. Okay. Metro West.
Thatcher Keyser, City of Framingham.
Thank you. North Shore Beverly.
Darlene Wynn, City of Beverly.
No Suburban Planning Council.
Yes, good morning. Tina Cassidy, representing Woburn Mayor Scott Galvin and the North Suburban Planning Council.
Thank you. South Shore Commission. Okay. SWAP. Okay, and Trick.
Yeah, good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing Trick.
Now, Jonathan, go back and see if you can get Laura Gilmore. She had technical difficulties, and maybe she doesn't anymore. She's with Massport.
Okay.
Do we see her on the screen?
I am looking on the list. Hold on.
She's got her hand raised, so unmute her.
She is unmuted. Ms. Gilmore from Massport.
I believe that Laura's having some technical issues right now, so we can maybe circle back to this, but just having some difficulty connecting to the audio.
All right, Laura, when you get yourself connected, raise your hand and we will call on you so you can state your name for the record. John, and could please call on Ken Miller from FFYs so he can state for the record that he's here.
Yes, Mr. Miller, please.
Ken Miller, Federal Highway Administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other attendees that need to be?
Nope. Thanks, everybody.
That completes the roll. Thank you.
Yep. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I don't have one. Executive Director's report, Tegan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will just start off by just reminding folks that if you try to mute yourself, staff is trying to very quickly find you and unmute you, but if you mute yourself, you'll have to go through an extra step to approve being unmuted. So just recognize that that will take more time and keep an eye out for that approval if that happens to you. So I just have a few updates on logistics for meetings. First of all, it just worth mentioning, although I don't think it's any surprise, we typically try to hold quarterly away meetings, and we will not be doing that in this current environment since, in a sense, it's all sort of an away meeting. So we will, continue to connect with MPO members after we again. In addition, the May meetings, Mr. Chair, if it works, I'd just like to pause and make sure people are okay with this. We'd like to propose that to maintain sort of a 2-week spacing and also get us on the right date for approving the TIP and other documents. We'd like to move the May meetings from the 7th to the 14th and then the second one out to the 28th. So they would be May meetings on the May 14th and 28th.
All right, so does anybody from the MPO have any objection to that? Hearing and seeing none. Keep going, Tegan.
Okay. Thank you. I did want to mention, related to the UPWP amendment that you have been discussing, that we are in the process of getting a strategic planning consultant on board. I've described this effort to the board in the past. I'm happy to revisit with any of you if you want to offline. We did interview a fully qualified proposer, and we've notified them as an apparent awarded bidder, but we're still in the contracting process. And so that's why I'm not fully sort of announcing that we're underway as of yet. I do want to offer an answer to a question I've heard already, which is whether or not it seems like a good idea to engage in this kind of process, given our work from home COVID-19 situation. And I just want to mention quickly to the board that I actually do think this is a really excellent time to be doing your strategic planning process. You know, we are in the midst of some level of uncertainty as it is, and we know that there will be some level of change, you know, in the future moving forward. And so this does seem like as good a time as any, and in fact, maybe a better time to be really talking about what the CTPS is as an organization, how it interacts with the MPO and the various stakeholders that it interacts with. So we will be moving ahead on roughly a 6-month schedule. If needed, we might adapt and extend it a little bit, a few months, because of the need to work more remotely at the moment. So those are my general updates. I do want to give a quick summary of today, because you are working with a lot of moving parts at the moment. Staff will talk about dates and try to make this clear in the slideshows as well. But I just want to quickly summarize that first, related to the tip, Matt Genova is going to be summarizing and trying to make clear where we ended up with 2 separate tip items that we've been discussing. The first is the amendment of the current tip, the federal fiscal year 2020 to 24. Tip amendment number 3, which you voted out on March 26th for the 21-day public review period. And it's on the agenda today for your final endorsement. Also, a few days ago, about a week ago, on the 23rd, we posted the draft fiscal year 2021 to 2025 tip for your review. That's the new tip with the outer year 2025 in it. And we'd also like you to consider voting this out for the 21-day public review period today. And final endorsement of that new tip will be on May 28th, as I mentioned. There is a third tip item that is newer, and that is we modified the agenda to incorporate an additional amendment number 4 to the current federal fiscal year 20 to 24 tip to include MBTA project changes. We will be talking about that, and it is on the agenda for you to vote out today for the 21-day comment period. And again, for final endorsement on May 28th. Moving off the tip, we will be asking for your final endorsement as well on the Long Range Transportation Plan LRTP amendment, which was also released for public review on May 26th. This was related to the tip since projects increased costs to above the $20 million threshold. So they needed to be included in the LRTP. And as a reminder, Anne will mention this, but there has been some discussion about a desire to revisit or talk about the threshold and the definition of the program areas in the LRTP, and those are MPO decisions. But we will expect that we'll dive into that conversation after this amendment and not necessarily as a part of this amendment. But again, as always, it's an MPO decision. But we will come back to you on that. And then finally, the 2020 UPWP amendment was released on March 26th for public comment, and we ask that you finally endorse that today as well. So looking ahead, May 28th will be a big date to approve a number of documents, as I've mentioned. But for now, I think I will end there and answer any questions if there are any, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing none. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment at this time? If so, use your raise hand function and we will call on you. First one, I will call you in the order you raise your hand. The first one is Heather Klisch. For the record, please state your name and your affiliation if you would like to state your affiliation.
Sure. This is, I'm unmuted, right? This is Heather Klisch.
Yes, we can hear you.
Terrific. I'm with the Appalachian Mountain Club. I am the Senior Director of Conservation and Recreation Policy. I submitted some comments in regards to its project number 608611 on Amendment 3 the project to replace the highway lighting at the interchange of Route 24 and I-93 that goes through the Blue Hills. I just wanted to also, I'm not going to repeat everything that I wrote in my comments, but I want to verbalize AMC's concern about this project. Our understanding is that it would replace the existing lighting with high mast poles and brighter lights at 4,000 Kelvin. Our concern is that information about environmental review seems like it's been a little bit hard to come by, and it appears from the information that's available that those newer, higher, brighter lights would cast significant spillover onto the Blue Hills, and where it's known that 4,000 Kelvin lighting has negative impacts on nocturnal ecosystems, it appears that it would spill over right into priority habitat at the Blue Hills. And so our recommendation for now is that that project simply involve replacing the lighting on the existing poles with 3,000 Kelvin or lower to not have that kind of impact that seems to be apparent. And I'll leave it at that. I think there might be others who want to comment as well.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, next up from the public is, and please excuse me if I mispronounce anybody's name, Meili Pinheiro Langer.
Hi, yes, this is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, great. This is Meili Pinheiro Langer, Associate Director with the Friends of the Blue Hills. And on the same tip, project files 608611. And to echo Heather, we met with, so the project, like as Heather was describing, is going to replace already existing poles. And we met with the director of the Natural Heritage and the DCR Land Protection Specialist, who were actually not aware of this program, this lighting project. And the concern is that the illuminance level of the current design is going to be 20 times greater than is recommended for these priority habitats, and that the state persons who are responsible for protecting this haven't been consulted in the project design. And we also learned that the project will actually draw more energy. So all highway projects, we feel, should be moving towards, with climate change and all this other stuff, we feel like it should be more energy efficient. And so we feel like this is really moving in the wrong direction, and costing $5.7 million is a high price tag to be hurting the environment and also costing much more money in the long term. And I can leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the members? Thank you. Next up is Leonard Simon.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I'll be brief. My name is Leonard Simon. I'm a former member of the Board of Selectmen in Sudbury. I'm here to speak on behalf of the full funding for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Phase 2D, TIP project ID 608164. The Phase 2D in Sudbury will connect with the southern end of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Concord, which was recently the recipient of the American Public Works Association Award for small projects as a project of the year. I would hope that in Sudbury we will continue that wonderful beginning of the tradition, and also have an equally beautiful rail trail in Sudbury. I have asked the town staff to expedite the completion of the design of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Sudbury, and at our annual town meeting, which has been postponed because of COVID, to acquire a portion of the CSX corridor in Sudbury, which will continue the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail from a small crossroad down to Route 20 as a proper terminus for the rail trail, so that it will have greater access and greater parking available for residents and visitors, and part of a very beautiful rail trail right from Lowell down to Sudbury and hopefully eventually to Framingham. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Any questions or comments from the members? Seeing none, next person from the public to speak will be Barbara Pike.
I'm Barbara Pike. I'm a Concord member of the Friends of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Board, and I am here to speak for full funding for Phase 2D in Sudbury. As you know, Concord has been highly successful, but the last half mile in Concord, south of Powder Mill Road, will not be constructed until Phase 2D in Sudbury is constructed. So we are supporting the construction of Phase 2D in Sudbury. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the members? Seeing none, next up is Ann Anderson.
Yes, I'm Ann Anderson from Acton. I'm a member of Friends of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and I also support full funding for the Rail Trail Phase 2D, project number 608164. The rail trail is fully occupied during this COVID time, all sections of it. And the section, we see friends from Sudbury on all sections of it. So there's definitely a demand for it. There's a need for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the members? Thank you. Next up, Steve Olenoff.
Hi, I'm speaking personally now, and I do live, I'm a 7-minute drive away from the interchange of 2493, where we have the lighting project. And so I'm very familiar with it. There's no real problem now. It is lit now. The lighting works fine. I was really surprised to see that they would be replacing it with these tall poles, which is something I had thought had, an idea that had come and gone, because the way those lights just spill over everywhere. The obvious way, and what's normally done, is just replace the heads with LED lights. You have like an 85% saving in energy. Instead, this increases the amount of energy. I think it's important to understand that, because a lot of people think, well, the more light, the better, the safer it is. And that's not true. When the human eye takes time to adjust, the approaches, all three approaches here are all dark for quite a distance. And then if you get into bright lights, the eye doesn't adjust quickly. So you hamper it in seeing. And then when you go back from the bright lights into the dark lights, again, the eye has to adjust, so you don't see very well. So it doesn't really make it safer to have this overly bright. And of course, the energy use is concerned. We have these greenhouse gas goals, which in the transportation section, we're having a hard time achieving anything. In here, we're increasing greenhouse gases, going in the wrong direction of the goals that we need. So I think the MPO should just remove this from the tip at this time. We have plenty of time between now and September. There'll be other amendments. If MassDOT comes back with a better way of doing this, we can put it back on, but I think it should be removed at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions or comments for Steve from the members? Seeing none. Next up is Emily T.
Hi, it's Emily Teller from the Friends of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. If we're all commenting now, that means that the vote of the Amendment 3 will go much faster. I just wanted to reiterate what Len said about the award that the Phase 2C has received in Concord. This is not only an American award, it's a North American award, because it includes Canada and the Maritimes and all of the United States. And we are the 2020 recipient of the American Public Works Association Small Communities, Rural Communities Award. And it's a really big deal. And our highway superintendent in Westford is the president of the New England chapter of the APWA. And he's the one that let me know about that. There hasn't been a press release yet, but it's a big deal. And I'm really thrilled. And I hope the MPO will recognize, I mean, you obviously participated in the nomination. So I hope that you will take credit for this also, and continue honoring the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail by funding the Sudbury, and as you heard from Barbara Pike, part of the Concord contiguous section. So thank you very much for putting this on the Amendment 3, and I look forward to a positive vote today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Ms. Teller? Seeing none, next up is Kelly Beatty.
Am I?
You're unmuted. You can,
okay,
yes,
great.
you're ready.
I'm a resident of Chelmsford, and I'm not a lighting expert, but I follow it closely. I'm here to comment about the interchange at I-93 and Route 24. That's number 608611 project. I have real problems with this. I realize it's quite far along. I realize that high mast lighting is something that MassDOT likes to install because it makes it easy for them to maintain it. However, in this particular setting, the Blue Hills Reservation, it is the wrong solution for this project. The Illuminating Engineering Society, which is the standard setting authority for lighting in the United States and North America, considers this LZ0, which is pristine landscape, and as such, according to IES, permanent lighting is not expected, and when used is limited in the amount of lighting and the period of operation. Special review should be required for any permanent lighting in this zone. And what MassDOT has done is actually just the opposite. There was no formal environmental review. Environmental stakeholders were not consulted. I actually checked in with 2 specialists in outdoor roadway lighting, and both of them find inadequacies with this plan. I've submitted a number of comments that I hope you all take the chance to look over. But as others have mentioned, I think this particular tip item ought to be postponed and removed so that a better lighting design can be brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, Fanny Osmond.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to say, as a personal resident of Acton, I can see the advantages of all the rail trail improvements. So I wanted to put in another vote for supporting the Sudbury addition. I also just wanted to second what Tegan said about the importance of planning and thinking about the future at this time. And I think I would encourage you all to think radically, that you can see how quickly things can change when they have to, and you can see that we can do it. So as you move forward and think about what we're doing in the next 5 years, try to think in that major changes possible way. Anyway, I thank you all for your work.
Thank you, Fanny.
I wasn't clear from the agenda if the Kelly's Corner was on anything that's being voted today, but as a resident of Acton, I would support moving forward with that. It's long overdue, the improvements to that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the members? Seeing none, Sharon Galpin.
Yes, I am, Sharon Galpin. I'm a member of the board of the Friends of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and speaking on behalf of the rail trail in general. I echo every comment they've already made today, but I just wanted to add that the trail was, when it was originally conceived, way back when, it was to go from Lowell all the way to Framingham. And so the funding for phase 2D is very important because it was an integral part of the design from the very, very beginning. And it's a marvelous trail. And that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the members? Seeing none, Jared Hansen.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm a resident of the city of Framingham and a member of the Friends of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Similar to the other commenters, I'd advocate for full funding for project 608164 for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail extension. I look forward to when this trail will connect all the way through to Framingham. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from members? Seeing none, that concludes everyone who wants to speak from the public at this time. Oh, wait. Yes, it does. Okay.
David, I'm sorry. We do have one other person who just has been unable to raise their hand, Janie Dretler.
Okay. Can you unmute Janie and let her speak, please?
Yep.
Thank you, Matt, very much.
No worries.
Thank you very much, Matt. Janie Dretler, Sudbury Board of Selectmen, speaking on my own behalf. I just wanted to let you know that I did submit a letter in support of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Phase 2D, and I thank you very much to the MPO for considering this project for funding, full funding in FY22. I also wanted to let you know that the Sudbury's new town manager, Mr. Henry Hayes, submitted a letter in support of the project as well. I think it came in a little bit late, but he is our new town manager, and he is supportive of this project as well. I also want to echo Ms. Pike's comments about Sudbury is actively using the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. We would love to use it in our community. We are going outside of our town to use it regularly. Also, I want to thank Matt Genova very much for his detailed comments and response to my letter, and I appreciate that very much. It was very thoughtful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Etler. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, I believe Paul Dale would like to comment. Can you unmute him and let him comment, please?
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment. I'm Paul Dale. I'm the Energy Committee Chair for the Massachusetts Sierra Club. And this morning I'm speaking on behalf of our 130,000 members and supporters in the state. We are very concerned about this lighting project at the interchange of Route 24 and I-93, which sits within an environmentally sensitive area, specifically the Blue Hills Reservation. The Blue Hills is the largest protected open space in metropolitan Boston, and the resource management plan adopted by DCR's Stewardship Council for this property calls for, quote, protecting those natural resources most at risk from avoidable environmental change. The high mast lighting that is being proposed for the interchange would create significant adverse effects on the surrounding nocturnal ecosystems and wildlife that live there. We are very concerned that the high mast poles in the woods surrounding the highway would contribute more light pollution to the Blue Hills Reservation and the neighborhoods surrounding it. Cost savings could be achieved by reusing the existing poles. Light overspill into the ecologically sensitive areas adjacent to the interchange, what we know is light pollution, and project costs could all be reduced by reusing and retrofitting the existing pole infrastructure. And when doing so, Mass DOT should use the lowest possible correlated color temperature, no higher than 2700 K. The lower temperatures are less disruptive for the wildlife and the vegetation, and we'd also like to see enhanced passive wayfinding measures such as signage or LED roadway markers or roadway striping that will further reduce the need for lighting and enhance the safety. Mass DOT must act with the best use of taxpayer money in mind. The safety objectives of this project can be achieved by simply upgrading the existing lighting at the current height, using the dark sky criteria in terms of the type of lighting. And safety can be further enhanced, as I've said, with the reflective signage and roadway striping. And this would save money for other projects. So the Blue Hills is a wonderful resource to our neighborhoods and cities and to the wildlife that dwell there. So let's not take an adverse step here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, is there anyone else from the public who would like to comment at this time? Seeing none, if you want to comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. We're now going to go back to the roll call because I believe some members who had technical difficulties or who arrived late are here now. So Jonathan, can you call the roll to get them on the record?
Yes, absolutely. Massport?
Hi there, this is Laura Gilmore from the Massachusetts Port Authority. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it too. Who's that baby?
It's great to be back with you all. This is my son, Noel. I've been on maternity leave for the last 4 months, so it's great to be back with you all.
Welcome,
Great
Noel.
to have you back. Welcome to Noel. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay, Magic? I saw Austin's name in the...
Hi, everyone. Austin Saganowitz from the town of Acton, representing the Magic subregion.
Thank you, sir. South Shore?
Good morning. Jennifer Constable from the town of Rockland, representing South Shore Coalition.
Thank you. And just to check to be sure, Mr. Chair, SWAP, anyone from SWAP?
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you.
All right, now we're back onto the agenda. Next item is the committee chairs reports. Are there any? Raise your hand if so. Seeing none. Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Lynn, do you have one?
It was easy for me to wait this time because I have nothing to report. Nothing's happened since the last meeting. but we are going to have another virtual meeting on the 13th. And I know that part of the agenda on that will be discussing the current tip that I'm assuming that we're going to vote out for public comment at this meeting. And we'll have another guest. And so I really want to encourage anyone who wants to participate in our meetings to join us. I think the virtual meetings really give a good opportunity for people to listen in and participate. So once again, invited to join. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of March 26th. Can I get a motion and a second from a member? Please raise your hand to make the motion and the second, and we'll unmute you so you can do it for the record. So can you unmute Brian Kane and Tina Cassidy, please, and let Brian go first?
Move
Ready,
to accept, I move to accept the minutes.
Unmute Tina, will you?
And I will second that motion.
Thank you. The motion having been made and seconded, are there any questions, comments, suggestions, or changes? Eric Arasa has his hand up. Eric? Oh, he took his hand down. Anybody? Seeing none, call the roll, please, on the motion to approve.
Okay. David Moeller?
Yes.
John Romano?
Yes.
John Bouchard?
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg?
Yes.
Laura Gilmore?
Yes.
Eric Barassa?
Yes.
Brian Kane?
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins?
Yes.
Tom Kadzis?
Kansas, yes.
Thank you. Jim Fitzgerald?
Affirmative.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Jay Monty?
Yes.
David Kozis?
Yes.
Daniel Amstutz?
Yes.
Sheila Page?
Yes.
Tom Bent? Tom Bent?
Yes.
Thank you. Austin Sigenowitz?
Yes.
Thank you. Thatcher Keyser?
Yes.
Darlene Nguyen?
Yes.
Tina Cassidy?
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable?
Yes.
And Tom O'Rourke?
Yes.
Thank you. That completes the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the draft federal fiscal year 2021 to 2025 Transportation Improvement Program. Matt Genova.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, everyone. I assume, can folks hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you. Just want to clarify before I dive in. So I'm here today with the first of three presentations, so please bear with me for the next couple of agenda items. My first presentation will be a summary of the contents of the draft federal fiscal years 2021 through 25 TIP in preparation for a vote to release it for a 21-day public review period. So the draft report has been posted to the MPO meeting calendar under today's date, along with supplemental materials, including a draft summary of the regional target programming, as well as draft MBTA programming information. So if you don't already have those items pulled up, feel free to pull them up and reference them as we talk today. Ooh. Sorry. It's going crazy. Okay. So the goals for today are, or rather the topics for discussion today are several. So I'll start out with some goals for today's conversation. We'll remind you briefly where we are in the TIP development timeline for the year. We'll talk a little bit about the actual TIP document that we've drafted for you all and posted to our calendar, and some updates to that are new this year. Then I will go into a summary of the federal fiscal years 21 to 25 programming, and then touch specifically on some of the new regional target projects that we programmed this year, before summarizing sort of a remainder of the key decisions that were made, and then moving into next steps and a discussion. All right, so goals for today. The goals for today are really twofold. First, I do want to recap the key takeaways from the federal fiscal years 21 to 25 TIP programming discussions that we've had over the last couple of months, really starting in earnest back in February when we discussed project scoring. And then hopefully the information I share with you all through that portion of the conversation will put you in a good position to vote to release the draft TIP for a 21-day public review period. Briefly, I want to remind you all of sort of where we are in the process. So we are in the home stretch here in April, where we are hopefully taking a vote today to release the draft TIP for public review. Again, that will go out for a 21-day public comment period, beginning here in early May, with the intention to endorse the final 21 to 25 TIP, pending public comments at the end of May, which, as Tegan mentioned earlier during her executive director's reports, that meeting will be May 28th. So moving into some of the updates to the document that we made this year. I do want to just sort of give you some of the broader contours of this year's report before we dive into the details of the contents. So this is sort of a snapshot of some of the report in a more visual way. So hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at it. As always, it's quite long and quite detailed. So I appreciate everyone who took a chance to skim through it and see everything that's in there. Because it is quite dense, I do want to draw your attention to a couple of key points. So on the left, you see the cover page for this year's reports. So this year we opted for a color scheme for the TIP that more closely mirrors the look and feel of the long range transportation plan, which is Destination 2040. So you'll also see this, this color scheme and theme echoed in the UPWP for 2021 as well. These adjustments were made to reinforce the notion that both the TIP and the UPWP are the processes that implement the vision, goals, and objectives for the MPO that are outlined in the long-range plan. So we really wanted to create sort of visual harmony between the three documents. We also made a handful of changes across the document that I want to draw your attention to. At the outside of the report, you'll notice an expanded executive summary that places more of the key programming specific decisions that were made this year front and center. The goal here is to really make clear from the opening pages of the report how this body has chosen to allocate its funding for the region in this TIP cycle, which is documented in the executive summary with several additional charts and tables, as well as some complementary text. Moving to the sort of right-hand side of the screen here, the third image You'll also notice this year that we added a new chapter 6 focused on transportation equity. This chapter aggregates some of the equity specific content previously housed in chapter 4. And chapter 4 is the performance measures chapter. By bringing this equity material into a new expanded chapter, we're able to reinforce the centrality of equity to our work and showcase more prominently the ways in which we think about equity in TIP project selection. So we hope that you'll take a minute to specifically look at chapter 6 if you haven't already. So on the subject of the document as a whole, this is as good a time as any to pause and recognize everyone who played a part in putting this together. So while I get to sit here in front of the camera today and present this work to you all, I do want to emphasize that I'm just really one of many people who are responsible for getting us to where we are in the TIP process today. So I hope you'll sort of humor me as I take a minute to thank everyone. First and foremost, I do want to say a quick thank you to Annette Dempster and Jonathan Church for their strategic guidance and timely review of TIP content this year. It's certainly much appreciated, especially as we got down to the wire. Thank you as well to Kate Parker O'Toole and Maureen Kelly. You're heading the bulk of the graphics and editorial work for this year's TIP. Thank you as well to Kim Delory for the overall report design, and to Jane Gillis, Ken Dumas, Megan Connolly, and David Davenport for their additional support on graphics and editing. On the content creation front, I do want to thank Betsy Harvey for her work spearheading the new chapter 6 that I just mentioned earlier. I also want to thank Anne McGann and Matt Archer for their work on chapters 4 and 5 of the TIP, as well as multiple appendices. And also a specific shout out to Michelle Scott, who provided significant guidance on chapter 4 while still being out of the office on maternity leave. Finally, I want to thank the rest of the certification activities team, including Roisin Foley, Kate White, Sandy Johnston, and Ariel Patterson for everything from crafting TIP-related communications, both to the board and to the public, to cataloging public comments and leading internal team coordination meetings on developing the TIP and the UPWP this year. So again, it really does take a village to make the TIP process happen and to make this report a reality. So I really appreciate the opportunity to recognize everyone's efforts here today. I'd like to dive briefly into a summary of this year's programming, all of which is documented in the draft tip. Again, that is posted to our meeting calendar for today. So this is a breakdown of the regional target funding across investment programs. The total size of the pie here is roughly $538 million over the 5 years of the TIP. You can see here that a plurality of MPO funding is allocated to complete streets projects, with more than 45% of funds allotted to that investment program. Not far behind is major infrastructure with 34% of funds, followed by intersection improvements at 11.9%, bicycle and pedestrian projects at 5.7%, and then community connections with 1.6% of overall funding over 5 years. This TIP cycle represents the first year that funding has been allocated to the MPO's Transit Modernization Program, which was created last year with the endorsement of the Long Range Plan. 1% of funding is allocated to that program in this year's TIP, and that funding is currently sort of just held for that program, and it will be allocated to specific projects in a future TIP cycle. And finally, this body elected during decision-making this year to leave 0.2% of our 5-year funding, or $1.2 million, unprogrammed. So as a reminder, when the LRTP was endorsed last August, 5-year funding goals were set for each of our 6 investment programs. These goals are shown on this slide in blue, with the proposed funding levels in 21 to 25 shown in gold. Overall, this year's TIP tracks fairly closely with the LRTP goals, though we are slightly over-programmed on bicycle and pedestrian projects and slightly under-programmed on intersection improvements. We set a 5% 5-year goal for transit modernization. But again, because this program is sort of in its infancy this year, it only has 1 year of funding allocated to it in 2025, which means we've only got about 1% of the overall TIP funding allocated to that program. So in future years, as we continue to build that out and add subsequent years of funding in 2026 and beyond, that percentage is fully expected to increase from its current 1% to closer to the 5% goal set in the long-range plan. And because we are short of the 5% goal there, because again, that program is new, the additional funding from transit modernization has sort of been in this cycle allocated to major infrastructure commitments. And you can see that we are about 4 percentage points over programmed on major infrastructure at 34% of funding relative to our 30% target. I also wanted to highlight how funding breaks down across subregions. You can see here that on the whole, funding in the TIP, which is shown in red, the leftmost bar of each cluster, tracks fairly closely with the percentage of population, jobs, and federal aid roadway miles in each subregion. A few notes on this slide though. North Suburban Planning Council had 2 projects added to the TIP this year in 2025. So that boosted their relative funding level higher than it's been in years past, which you see reflected in this chart. Additionally, Metro West had a large project programmed in 2020. That was the $20 million Pond Street project in Ashland. Because 2020 is no longer a part of this TIP cycle, so their overall funding levels in Metro West have sort of dropped a little bit relative to what they have been in years past. That's more of a quirk of sort of where we are in the programming schedule on any given project than anything else. But I did want to call those to your attention since those are sort of the biggest changes that came with this breakdown during this TIP cycle. So in addition to some of these overall metrics, I do want to briefly touch on the specific new additions that were made to this year's TIP. So in allocating our federal fiscal year 2025 regional target funds, this board chose to program the highest scoring complete streets, intersection improvement, and bicycle and pedestrian projects. On the complete streets front, that is the roadway and intersection improvements project at Woburn Common in Woburn for roughly $16.7 million. In intersection improvements, we programmed a project in Burlington and Woburn, the intersection reconstruction at Route 3 and Bedford Road for roughly $1.7 million. And then finally, in the bicycle and pedestrian investment program, we programmed the multi-use path construction of the Independence Greenway at I-95 and Route 1 in Peabody for roughly $6.8 million. And again, this is an additional segment in Peabody of the Independence Greenway over and above what we programmed in fiscal year 2024 during last year's TIP cycle. So it's 2 separate segments of the same path system. So during this TIP cycle, funding was also allocated to specific projects within the MPO's Community Connections program for the first time. And this marks the pilot round of this program. So a total of $822,000 was allocated to 5 projects in fiscal year 2021, including a micro transit service in Newton, signal improvements at Davis Square in Somerville, Concord Avenue Transit Signal Priority Project in Cambridge, some bike shelters for the section of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Concord, and some marketing funding for a carpool program in Sharon that aims to connect commuters with the Sharon commuter rail station. I do also want to note again that 2025 marks our first year of funding allocated to the transit modernization program. So $5.5 million was allocated in that year for this program. And again, this will be further allocated to specific projects in future TIP cycles. So a couple of other key decisions to summarize here before I turn it over to you all for a discussion. So just as a reminder, as we were sort of determining this year's 5-year funding plan, we covered cost increases for a total of 31 projects. And 19 of those cost increases were for more than $1 million. So as you all well know at this point, that was a major driver of decision-making this year. This year we did have 13 projects that were delayed to later years, which is a fairly high number, certainly higher than last year's tip cycle. This is for sort of a mix of reasons. Some projects did have readiness concerns and were not ready to be programmed in their current programming year, and so they were subsequently recommended to be moved out. And then some other projects were in the unfortunate position of having to be moved out due to financial constraints in any given programming year, again, due to the cost increases noted on this slide as well. In decision making this year, we also created new advanced construction schedules for 3 projects. That is the Mount Auburn Street project in Watertown, the Ferry Street project in Everett, and then we chose to split the funding that we've allocated to the Sumner Tunnel project in Boston over 2 years as well. And then finally, sort of a big picture way, funding for Rutherford Avenue increased by just $4 million this year. So again, we sort of used a lot of the already allocated funding for Rutherford Avenue to, or sort of adjusted that funding year to year to accommodate cost changes and schedule changes for other projects. So even though we added $44 million to Rutherford Avenue in 2025, that actually only increased our total commitments over the 4 years that we currently have allocated to that project by $4 million. So moving into very briefly some of the next steps in the TIP process to get us across the finish line before we start the discussion. So today, April 30th, the aim here is to vote to release the draft TIP for public review. As has been mentioned earlier today, we also have a couple of other votes on both TIP Amendment 3 as well as LRTP Amendment 1. So we'll have future discussions on those here shortly. And then, as Tegan mentioned in her executive director's report, we do have a new TIP amendment, and that is Amendment 4, which we hope to vote out for public review today. In early May, so here in the next handful of days, we do anticipate releasing both the draft TIP and TIP Amendment 4 for public review. And then that puts us in a position in late May at the May 28th MPO meeting to endorse both the final TIP and TIP Amendment 4. So with that, I appreciate your time, and I will turn it back over to the chair to guide the discussion.
Thank you, Matt. Questions from the members? Please raise your hand if you have questions or comments you'd like to make. Okay, we'll start with Daniel Amstutz.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt, thank you for the presentation. I was interested in the information that you provided about the number of projects that had cost increases and were delayed. And, you know, we've had a few conversations about this particular issue, of course, over the last several weeks or the last several meetings. And I'm wondering if you can provide a little more quantify that a little bit more, if there's or if it's been done before, of like a trend of, you know, how many projects, how many, if 31 projects had cost increases, you know, how many projects is that, and how many of those were over $1 million? Well, you said 19 were over $1 million, but, you know, percentage of that based on, you know, how many projects that we have in the TIP right now. So I'm just curious, and also, you know, historically, what's that looked like? So I'm just sort of curious to see if that will help with the whole discussions about the issues around cost, delaying projects and cost increases and so on.
Absolutely. I guess I can respond briefly to the sort of question on the number of projects. So we have, I believe it's 47 projects programmed with regional target funds in this year's TIP. So 30 projects would represent roughly 2/3 of the projects that are programmed. But that doesn't sort of fully capture it because, well, yeah, that's sort of, yeah. So it's roughly 2/3 of projects had cost increases. which, yeah, is a fairly high number. Yeah, I think it's a great idea to spend a little bit more time addressing this in a nuanced way. So I will sort of posit that if the board is interested in doing something like this, once we get through the tip cycle this year, maybe we can have a follow-up conversation later this summer, looking at more of what trends look like over time and things like that. That's an analysis that I've been wanting to spend more time on, and that I would love to bring to the board, but obviously in the midst of the tip cycle, time is limited. But I would be happy to do that if the board is interested in that, perhaps later this summer.
Sure, and I think I'll just clarify. I think I'm mainly talking about the regional target projects, or the ones that we've been shifting around. So, not all projects necessarily, but in any case, yeah, I think that would be a good conversation to have later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks. Next up is Sheila Page.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a comment and then a couple questions. My comment, I just wanted to thank Matt for taking the time to respond, your thoughtful response to Lexington's public comment in regards to the Bedford Minuteman extension, and explaining that bump. I think this extra effort is really going to be appreciated by everyone, in that it validates public comment. So thank you for your time in doing that. My question, I have two questions. One is a process question. We're voting to release the 21 to 25 tip, but then we also have 20 to 24 amendments. And so in theory, those amendments are embedded in the 21 to 25 tip. So I'm a little confused I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly sort of what we're voting on and what we're changing. And then my third item is regarding the Blue Hills project. I do think the public comment raised some important issues that I'd like to see evaluated before we vote on the tip, but I believe it's out in 2023. So perhaps MassDOT could take the intervening, rather than losing their spot, MassDOT could take the intervening time to reevaluate lighting.
Okay, so Matt, you wanna answer some questions, and then I'll help if I need to, if you need me to.
Sure. Yeah. So I appreciate you asking, because this is sort of a complex time in the tip timeline, because we do have several sort of moving pieces that overlap very much. So tip amendment 3, which we'll come back to after this, the conclusion of this presentation, serves to sort of solve the cost and schedule issues in fiscal year 2020, because those projects need to be advertised for construction this year, since we're in the middle of fiscal 20. And because those changes ripple through the rest of the TIP through 2021 and beyond, the programming decisions that we made for the new TIP are also reflected in the amendments. So right now, TIP Amendment 3 is essentially updating the current TIP, which is the 20 to 24 TIP, to reflect most of what will be in the new TIP, the 21 to 25 TIP, outside of fiscal year 25. So there is sort of a 4-year overlap in that Venn diagram, where all of the projects are aligned. And then the same sort of theme applies to TIP Amendment 4 that we're going to be discussing here shortly as well, which is an amendment to align the MBTA projects and programs in the current 20 to 24 TIP with the forthcoming 21 to 25 TIP. So it's really, the reason we do it right now is to allow those 2020 projects to move forward. But there is, most of those amendments and the actual TIP will overlap and be identical. So I hope that.
Right.
No,
So if a member wants to make a motion on the TIP, and that motion carries, that project may also be reflected in the TIP amendment, and the same motion would have to be made and carried in the TIP amendment. Right, Matt?
Yes. I believe that.
You could do it in either order. So we could have taken up the TIP amendment first. The point is these two documents are sort of lockstep together, and you can't approve them both at once. So we put the TIP on first. Now, Matt, on Sheila's question about the lighting project, when is the lighting project scheduled for? What year?
So the lighting project is a fiscal year 2020 statewide project. So it's not funded using regional target funds, but rather using statewide funds. My understanding is that the amendment, TIP Amendment 3, serves to adjust the final cost of that project to what's needed to advertise the project later this fiscal year. So I do believe that the intention is to advertise that project here before the end of the fiscal year, which would be before September 30th.
Right. So again, just to be clear, if someone would like to put a pause on that project, the way to do that is to make a motion to amend it out, or amend it out, we would then come back to you when we were ready to amend it back in, or whatever. But the way to, if you want to put a physical pause on the project, a member would have to make a motion to delete the project from the amendment, and it's a FY20 project, so it's not in the TIP, so you don't do it now. And then we would debate and vote on that motion, and if it got taken out, we come back to you when we're ready to put it back in, if indeed we could get a place where everybody agreed it should go back in.
Okay, I appreciate that. I will bring it up for the amendment discussion.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks for your time.
Yep. Next up is Ken Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just this whole discussion about the lighting project raises a good point. Matt, can you go back to the pie chart that you showed that showed the funding for the target projects? I note that you showed only a pie chart for the target projects, which understandably is a major topic of discussion for the MPO. But I think it would make sense going forward that when we are when the MPO is approving these kinds of things, that we also talk about the entire program that is covered by the TIP. I mean, this could be a little bit misleading. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of transit funding that this MPO is programming each year, and as well as all of the statewide projects on the highway side. I think if somebody looking at this and not being knowledgeable would say, gee, this MPO is only funding, using 1% of its funds for transit modernization, which would be quite misleading. So I think it would be useful in the future to always put the target funding in the context. The MPO, as David rightly mentioned, as the chairman rightly mentioned, this MPO is responsible for programming all projects, transit projects, statewide projects, as well as the target projects. And this MPO has the right to have their voice heard on any project that's in the TIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. John Bouchard.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to comment that, we looked at this project. I don't have all the specific details. I'm not able to get into the full systems this morning while participating at this MPO meeting. But we looked at what our options were for replacing and rehabilitating the lighting system at I-93 and Route 24 on this project. And it's a combination of replacement and rehabilitation. Some of the existing lighting towers are, are items or are assets of the Commonwealth that we have found issues with in other parts. And as such, we're not reusing those that we consider to be suspect after inspection. And we're replacing those with, newer systems. I don't have the specifics on the lighting analysis that was conducted in other design elements, but we did go through a environmental review for site specific, and then through our federal categorical exclusion checklist to verify any impacts to federal resources. See, and like I said, we tried to look at this as a replacement and rehabilitation highway lighting system at this location versus a complete replacement and a lot of new infrastructure. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. Leonard Diggins.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had one question, but now I have two based on Ken Miller's previous comment. I guess I just don't understand his comment because I'm looking at the pie chart here, and that is for the 2021 to 25 period. So this reflects what we're spending for that period. What else is it that we have control over?
Right. So to be clear, this reflects highway funding controlled by the MPO. So what we call regional target money. It doesn't include the entire MPO package, which we will talk about in a few minutes, the MBTA transit program, as well as the WRTA transit program and the CADA transit program. So if an uninitiated person saw this chart, they would think that there's only that only the MPO or the Boston federal program is only 1% goes to transit modernization, but it's 1% of our highway funds we flex to transit and dedicate to transit modernization. On a similar issue, PED, the highway MassDOT in our portion of the TIP funds bike PED projects, as well as the region. Those bike PED projects aren't reflected in this chart. This is just a chart about the money the MPO controls. How does the MPO spend it? The highway money the MPO controls. How do they spend it?
Got it. Thank you very much. And now to
You're welcome.
my primary question. Matt, could you advance by one slide?
Matt, go back one slide. I don't know if you heard it.
Advance. Yeah, that one exactly. So as you can see here, that for major infrastructure, there is more spending than we, I think, than our goal. And do you have a sense, Matt, of how much this is impacted by projects that may have been categorized, perhaps as complete streets or whatever, and then because they went over a certain amount, they got put into major infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess, maybe responding to your first question as well as to Ken's point, I think it's a great idea to zoom out a little bit more and include a fuller picture of not just the regional target funds, but also the statewide highway funding and the transit funding in presentations like this. So that's certainly something that I can clarify and do more of going forward. So I appreciate the feedback on that. And then Len, to your second question here. Yeah, so as pictured in this chart, this does not recategorize the projects that were amended that were included in the long range plan amendment for cost increases, because they've now gone over their $20 million threshold. So basically this chart includes projects that we programmed sort of at first as major infrastructure projects. If we were to then layer on the three newly amended LRTP projects, Ferry Street in Everett, Mount Auburn Street in Watertown, and then one other one. If you added those in, then this number would be even higher. So the complete streets funding would drop down several percentage points, and then major infrastructure would go up. The reason that we didn't include it that way in this chart is because, as was mentioned earlier today, we do want to have a further discussion with you all as the board about how we approach this issue going forward, and we anticipate having that conversation in the coming weeks. And so we wanted to move forward with that conversation before sort of adjusting how we're showing things.
Matt, thank you.
So Matt, if you had adjusted things to reflect the $25 million. That bar would be significantly higher, the major infrastructure bar, and the complete streets bar would be significantly lower. And wouldn't that have actually teed up the conversation we want to have a little bit better? I mean, this looks okay to me, but I think what we're really saying is if you have a $25 million threshold, a lot of projects that nobody thinks of as quote unquote major infrastructure have now tipped over into that category, right?
That is correct. Yes, it would have been helpful to put that together.
Right. Okay. Other questions from MPO members? Any questions or comments from the public before we move off of the highway program? Seeing none. Now, Matt, are you going to tee up the transit program, or you just want to let Samantha talk about it?
So my sort of anticipated approach here was to address the transit program when we talk about the amendments, the transit amendments. It includes sort of the proposed programming for this year. So I was going to introduce it as the amendment for the MBTA.
Right. But we're supposed to take a vote on the TIP, and the TIP includes the transit program, right? But this whole item is an action item, yes?
That is correct. Yes, this is an action item.
Yeah. So the MPO is not going to take a vote on an action item without hearing a presentation on the entire item. So why don't we go to Samantha, and she can talk about both 20 and 21 through 25, and then when we get back to the amendment vote for Amendment 4, she can remind people about what she said on 20. Does that work for you, Sam?
Yes, that works. All right, okay. I'm up. All right. So as Matt mentioned, the amendment and the TIP are very closely interrelated. And the easiest way for me to describe why is that as part of our building CIP and the TIP, we do a global review of all project schedules and cash flows. And so now that we have updated cash flow forecasts and estimates for our full suite of projects, we're able to update both what we intend to spend in 2020, as well as what we intend to spend over the next 5 years. So it's neat and easy to kind of do it all in one fell swoop. So I'm going to talk about both the 2020 to 2024 amendment, as well as the 21 to 25 TIP. All of the documentation is up on the MPO website in tables at the program level, which is what you all will approve, but also summaries each of the projects that fit within those programs. I think, I presented a few weeks ago on the 2020 to 2024 TIP, and I gave you a preview that I thought most projects would be very similar and familiar to you, and it holds true. And I'll just call out a couple of exceptions as I talk through this. So as you recall, this is our third touch with the MPO board on the MBTA federal program. We presented an overview of our CIP process in February, and we reviewed existing projects earlier this month. I think it's so far been good engagement, and I appreciate all of the questions and commentary we received. Starting with the amendment, the TIP amendment reflects proposed changes to the MBTA's federal program since this group last endorsed our TIP last May. So that includes changes to sources and uses, as well as some technical adjustments to cash flows. And for the last few years, we've presented both the amendment and the new TIP because they reflect the same set of updated cash flows. On sources, in terms of our total FTA formula funds, federal fiscal year 2020 has been increased to reflect the carryover of unobligated federal fiscal year 19 funds that we are now in the process of obligating onto grants. 21 through 24 amounts are somewhat lower than initially projected because the 5337 formula funds received in federal fiscal year 20 were lower than we originally intended.
So Sam, I can't hear you anymore, Sam. Can everybody else hear Sam?
No, I can't.
That's the automatic train control project from FTA formula funds to RIF loans. So we're using the Railroad Rehabilitation Improvement Financing RIF program to seek federal loans for that project instead of using formula funds. And those funds were redistributed to other programs. Other technical adjustments you'll see, primarily changes in program amounts due to updated project cash flows consistent with our draft CIP and the TIP. Another change is we split up a project that was previously called Green Line Track Upgrades into line-specific projects. We also pulled out a project called the Virginia DOT option for 60 buses out of the larger future bus procurement. What we're doing here is we're accelerating the procurement of 60 buses to add additional capacity to our bus fleet, and we are able to hop on to a procurement that VDOT is doing rather than waiting for our full process to work its way out. So that's the TIP amendment. The TIP reflects our federal program in the draft FY21 to 25 CIP, which is currently going through board approval. The TIP list should be very familiar to the MPO. Most projects I presented a few weeks ago and were carried on the FY20 to 24 TIP with a handful of exceptions. There is only one truly new project to the MBTA, which is a bus overhaul program. This is just consistent with our asset management goals, executing midlife overhauls of our bus fleet on schedule. There are two projects that are new to the TIP, but not to the MBTA CIP. One is the reconstruction or improvements at Worcester Union Station, for which we also have sought a FRA discretionary grant. And the other is the Mattapan high-speed line transformation, which is a suite of improvements to facilities, infrastructure, track, signals, and power to enable the use of the Mattapan line. Some other changes are primarily funding for an additional year of procurement in like the South Attleboro station improvements, costs for the capital acceleration program, such as the Green Line track projects I mentioned, as well as the acceleration of the Braintree and Quincy Adams garage projects, and then other scope and budget increases. That is the summary of both our 20 to 24 TIP amendment, as well as our 21 through 25 TIP. Again, there are short descriptions of every project in the materials that were posted on the MPO website, and I am happy to answer any specific questions.
Very good. Thank you, Sam. Any questions for Samantha? Brian Kane.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to go on the record here supporting this and sort of applaud Samantha and the T and her team for what they've done. As I listened to her description, I heard reference to places like Worcester, Mattapan, South Attleboro, Braintree, modes such as commuter rail, Green Line, and bus. The efforts here span not only the MPO region, but span the entire MBTA service district. They span all modes of the T or most of them. And, I think it's important that we recognize the amazing effort that Sam and her team are doing here. Spending over $1 billion a year has been a goal of the MBTA for years. They're finally starting to reach it. The federal program, the TIP amendments and the TIP are a huge part of that. And I think it's very important that we endorse this amendment as well as the MBTA's TIP, which reflects its CIP. So I am very much in support of this and wanted to state that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brian. Other comments from other members? Seeing none. Matt, am I ready to take a motion to approve the TIP for 21-day public comment period? Matt? Okay, not hearing anything to the contrary, can I get two members to raise their hands to make a motion to release this draft TIP for a 21-day public comment period? All right, Brian Kane, can you unmute Brian?
Move to release the draft TIP for 21-day comment period.
Thank you. And can you unmute Thatcher Keyser?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded, Jonathan, please call the roll.
Okay, David Moeller,
Yes.
John Romano,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes. John Bouchard, yes.
thank you. Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Yes.
thank you. Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
thank you. Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
thank you. Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
thank you. Tom Kadzis,
Yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz,
Yes.
Sheila Page,
Yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Saganowitz, yes.
Patrick Keyser,
Patrick Keyser votes yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can you put the agenda back up, please, Matt Archer? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Highway Tip Amendment number 3. I believe Matt Genova was frozen earlier when I tried to call him. I hope he's unfrozen now. Matt, can you hear me and make the presentation?
Yes, I can. And sorry about that. I briefly lost internet connection, so thank you for your patience.
No worries, Matt.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as a follow-up to my last presentation, I do want to discuss Amendment 3 to the fiscal years 2020 through 24 TIP today. So this amendment, again, was released for public review on March 30th. And the public comment period officially closed for the amendment on April 20th. So there are 3 components to Amendment 3. There are statewide highway projects, regional target highway projects, and transit projects. So I'll start by highlighting some of the key reasons that the amendment was undertaken in the first place. So this is something I touched on a little bit earlier, but I do want to sort of reiterate so that we're on the same page. So the key purpose of Amendment 3 is to reconcile the cost and schedule changes to projects in fiscal year 2020 so that these projects can be advertised for construction before the end of this fiscal year. This reconciliation happened for both statewide and regional target funded projects. So on the regional target side of things, the changes in fiscal year 20, again, rippled through the rest of the TIP. And so Amendment 3 also serves fiscal years 21 through 24 in the current TIP, the 22 through 20.
Hey, Matt, I can. There you go.
Oh.
Good, keep going.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, and so this allows all 5 years of the TIP to stay within its annual fiscal constraints. So on also on the statewide side, Amendment 3 programmed 2 transit projects, actually in the highway program, that received grants through the first round of MassDOT's Workforce Transportation Program. 1 grant apiece went to NWRTA and CADA for projects that help connect people to jobs in their respective service areas. So in addition to what was presented for Amendment 3 at the March 26th MPO meeting, I do want to raise a few other adjustments that have subsequently been added to the amendments as a result of the public comment period. So in early April, MPO staff received a comment letter from MassDOT Highway District 5 recommending the reprogramming of 2 projects as a part of the amendments, and then subsequently as a part of the 21 through 25 TIP, so this is the new TIP that we just discussed. So due to readiness concerns recently discovered for project number 606130, the intersection improvements at Route 1A and Upland Road in Norwood. This project, which is currently programmed for approximately $7.9 million in 2021, was recommended by the district to move out 1 year into 2022. To replace this project, the district has recommended moving forward project number 601607, the reconstruction of Atlantic Avenue in Hull. This project was programmed in 2022 for approximately $8.3 million, and again is recommended to be moved into 2021. This adjustment to these 2 projects requires the moving of roughly $32,000 in funding for Sumner Tunnel from 2021 through into 2022 to balance out the changes. So this is something that we discussed briefly at the last MPO meeting on April 16th. Again, it was sort of a result of public comments submitted by MassDOT Highway District 5 during the amendment period. We did receive a couple of other comments from MassDOT staff, and I do want to address those here. So statewide project number 608608, the highway lighting improvement project at I-93 and Route 3 in Braintree, was completely obligated at advertisements back in fiscal year 2019. So this project is shown as removed through the amendment in fiscal 2020 because funding was no longer needed for that project. And I do want to clarify that this is a different highway lighting project from the one that we've been discussing thus far during this meeting. And then one other sort of clarifying note here, no substantive changes were made to either of the workforce transportation projects, but the way that they were shown in the table was adjusted slightly to include both federal and matching funds. So the way that I had originally shown them did not include the matching funds. So we just made that correction so that the full picture is there in the amendment materials. So now that we have reviewed the specifics of Amendment 3, I do want to have, or rather take some time to go over the public comments that were received. In addition to the comments that I just mentioned from MassDOT Highway staff, we did receive 12 other comments on this amendment. So you've heard from some of these folks today, but I do want to do these comments justice by sort of summarizing each of the points that were made within the comments. And I do also want to say thank you to everyone who commented both in this meeting and prior to the meeting in written form. Your input and feedback is always welcome, and we certainly appreciate you being a part of the conversation. So I'll begin with the comments that were submitted on behalf of regional target projects and then move to discussing the comments received on statewide projects. So starting with regional target project number 608164, that's phase 2D of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Sudbury. In addition to the comments you heard today, we did receive some letters of support for this project. So the first comes from Len Simon, a former member of the Select Board in Sudbury, who writes to affirm his support for the rail trail. Among the many reasons cited for why this project should move forward in 2022 as planned, Mr. Simon notes the consistent and robust support for the project within the town, including through the full funding of the project's design. He states the importance of the trail in enhancing safety and regional connectivity for all the communities in the broader trail network, and highlights the town's enthusiasm for continuing the design process in partnership with MassDOT. A second letter on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail comes from Emily Teller of the Friends of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. She notes the town of Sudbury's financial commitment to the project as demonstrated by the funding of the purchase of the CSX right-of-way for the trail. Ms. Teller also highlights the recent awarding of Phase 2C of the Bruce Truman Rail Trail, the honor of the Public Works Project of the Year from the American Public Works Association. Again, this is something we heard in verbal comments earlier today, but I want to emphasize that because it is particularly exciting and great that a regional project here has received such recognition. And for all these reasons, Ms. Teller advocates for the project to remain as programmed in fiscal 22. Finally, Jamie Dretler of the Sudbury Select Board writes in support of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, in addition to the benefits for safety and regional connectivity that I noted earlier. Ms. Dretler states that the alignment of this project with the town of Sudbury's master plan, which aims to promote safe transportation alternatives for all residents. She also highlights the recent finding by the project's consultant that the trail will not have any adverse impacts to the surrounding wildlife habitats, which is certainly positive news. Though, I guess I do want to highlight one other comment, though it wasn't specifically submitted on Amendment 3, because we're talking about the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, I will highlight that we received an additional letter, as mentioned earlier, from the new town manager in Sudbury, Henry Hayes. Mr. Hayes notes the commitment of the town to moving the project forward through the design process, and thanks the MPO for fully funding the project in fiscal year 2022, despite the significant financial constraints faced during this year's TIP process. So this letter was not posted as part of the amendment, but will be posted along with the other public comments we receive on the draft TIP for a future meeting. So please be on the lookout for that in coming weeks. Moving now to comments submitted on project number 607738, the Minuteman Bikeway extension in Bedford. We received 2 letters on this project. The first is from David Manoogian, the Director of Public Works for the town of Bedford. Mr. Manoogian writes to emphasize the town's 15-year commitment to this regionally significant project and highlights the town's enthusiasm for moving the design process forward with MassDOT in the coming months. While thankful for the MPO's support of the project, he expresses disappointment that the project was delayed from 2022 until 2023 in both Amendment 3 and the draft 21 to 25 TIP. And he further requests that the project experience no additional delays in future TIP cycles as it moves towards advertisement, given the high priority for this project at the municipal level. The second letter on the Minuteman Bikeway extension comes from James Malloy, the town manager of Lexington, and Doug Lucente, the chair of the Lexington Select Board. They write to affirm the importance of the Minuteman Bikeway extension for the entire region, noting the heavy use of the existing Minuteman path by Lexington residents. They advocate for the trail as a vital way to improve the safety of non-auto travelers in the region, and highlight the specific benefits of the project for those with disabilities and those looking to connect to the Alewife MBTA station. We also received a letter on behalf of projects number 605168. That is the intersection improvement project at Route 3A and the Summer Street Rotary in Hingham. Thomas Mayo, Hingham's town administrator, writes to thank the MPO for supporting an increased budget for this project through Amendment 3. He expresses his dismay, however, that the amendment delayed the project from 2024 to 2025, as this project does not have any readiness issues that would necessitate such a delay. He notes that the town has a strong commitment to keeping this project on track for a prospective 2024 advertisement date and requests that the MPO retain this project in 2024 because of its importance for the safety of all users along the corridor. Though again, in the amendment, that project is shown as moved to 2025. Moving now to the statewide projects. So some of these comments have been mentioned earlier today by folks who participated during the public comment period. So thanks again for those comments. But I do want to just sort of in a broad way reiterate the concerns of several of those stakeholders. So the concerns expressed were on statewide project number 608611, is the replacement and rehabilitation of the highway lighting system at I-93 and Route 24 in Randolph and Quincy. This project is, again, in fiscal year 2020, in the 2020 to 2024 statewide highway portion of the TIP. So the first letter we received is from Robert Kearns of the Sierra Club, Massachusetts, who reached out early in the public comment period to request an extension of the 21-day window. He notes that the COVID-19 pandemic has made it challenging to do proper community engagement around this project and asked if an extension to the public comment period would be considered. I will note that in response to the concerns expressed by Mr. Kearns, I did inform him that at that time the MPO had no intention of increasing or expanding the 21-day window, and that the vote was to do a 21-day review period. Subsequently, we received 5 other letters on this project, including from Heather Klisch on behalf of the Appalachian Mountain Club, James Lowenthal, the president of the Massachusetts chapter of the International Dark Sky Association, Kelly Beatty, also on behalf of the International Dark Sky Association, Deb Pasternak, the president of Sierra Club Massachusetts, and from Judy Lehrer Jacobs, the executive director of the Friends of the Blue Hills. So I'm going to touch on these letters sort of collectively because they highlight the same sort of core set of issues. So to begin, they note the environmentally sensitive nature of the Blue Hills Reservation, which sits immediately adjacent to the proposed project area. As a protected wildlife area, the reservation falls within what the Illuminating Engineering Society deems a Zone 0, where permanent lighting is not recommended. The proposed design for the project, as was mentioned earlier, is 20 times brighter than any recommended brightness levels for a Zone 0. The letters also note that the proposed lighting temperature of 4000 K is nearly twice the 2200 K light that is present at the interchange today. The commenters state that this increase in blue light, along with the use of high mast poles in place of the current shorter lighting poles, will contribute to much higher levels of light pollution and could do harm to the wildlife in the adjacent Blue Hills Reservation. They also state that the new lighting design is projected to increase rather than decrease energy use, a result that is untenable given the cost of the project at $5.7 million and the stated commitment of MassDOT to address climate change through investments in transportation infrastructure. In their letters, some correspondence with MassDOT's project manager for this project is detailed. It was noted that MassDOT has proposed some mitigation measures, including the use of lighting shields to limit the amount of glare that filters into the reservation. But the letters state that these measures do not go far enough in addressing the negative impacts of the project. The letters collectively question the reasons for the project being pursued, including asking whether there are documented safety issues due to low visibility in the area today. They state that a more robust analysis of the impacts of the project on the nearby reservation is warranted, and that more engagement should be done with key stakeholders in the area, such as the Friends of the Blue Hills. Collectively, the commenters request that MassDOT not move forward with the project until other design alternatives are legitimately considered. That would be more appropriate for the environmentally sensitive context in which the project sits. They state several options, including exploring the reuse of the existing low mast poles, the use of lower color temperature lighting, and the use of LED lane markers to enhance visibility without adjusting the overhead lighting. So that summarizes sort of a high level both the content and the comments received on Amendment 3 to the fiscal years 2020 to 24 TIP. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair to guide the discussion.
Thank you, Matt. Are there comments or questions from the members before we take a motion to approve this amendment? Sheila Page.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm back. So I do have a few questions. I wondered if MassDOT knows, and I know John had mentioned he didn't have access to his files, so he may not be able to answer this, but I wondered the change in pole height as well as the difference in lighting, candles or Kelvin. And I did also want to understand if this was just upgrading the poles because the poles are unsafe, or is there a traffic safety issue?
John, can you answer Sheila's questions to the best of your abilities?
I didn't catch all of them, Sheila. I can't get into the full system right now to look at everything, look at plans and calculations. But what I stated on the existing infrastructure is that we're looking at rehabilitating and upgrading the poles and not simply doing a luminaire switch. We have found some of the light poles statewide to have deficiency due to age. And so we're replacing those that we feel are suspect that have experienced deterioration in other parts of the Commonwealth. And I don't have the information on the new pole height or the candle watt on the luminaires at this time. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Sheila?
thank you. I think I will. I see somebody else wants to speak. Yeah, so I
Right,
guess
so-
I'll wait.
Right, so here's, just so we can be clear, I'm assuming at some point a motion will be made, but what
Correct.
we'll do first, we'll take a motion and a second to get the amendment on the table in front of us, and then we'll take a motion anybody has on any specific projects. So when people hear me ask for a motion to move the amendment, don't assume I've forgotten or we're trying to run roughshod over the amendment of the amendment process. We're just going to take these in order. But in the meantime, we're still on discussion. So is there any more discussion at this time? Lynn?
Appreciate Steve. I'm sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I really appreciate Steve Polinoff reaching out to me regarding the lighting project in Canton. That said, all the other comments made a big impact on me too. And so maybe we'll talk about this more when we talk about the amendment itself. So if you want to wait for that discussion, please feel free to do so. I just want to understand the impact that if we did say that we wanted to put a pause on this and explore it more, what impact that would have on MassDOT. And also, I get the sense now that maybe since there's pole replacement, that this issue may exist in other places if we're talking about replacing a lot of poles with higher poles statewide. Thanks.
Okay, so I will answer your first question about the impact. So the way this can work, if the MPO so chooses, is the MPO, because there are state funds and regional funds, and this is project is programmed out of the state funding, the MPO has what is in effect a veto authority over a specific project. So if we're looking to use federal funds on a project, even a quote unquote state project, and the MPO opts not to put it in the tip, we cannot do that project with federal funds. So we could still do it, by the way, with state funds, but we couldn't do it with federal funds. So if the MPO today opts to remove this from the amendment, we will not be able to proceed with advertisement of this project until we either decide to fund it with federal funds, non-federal funds, or we convince the MPO that it is a project that should be funded and move forward. And obviously there would be either we would convince you that our justifications are appropriate, or we theoretically could go back and make changes to the project and bring it back to you. So that's the effect of what would happen today. Now, that money, if this project doesn't move forward this fiscal year, we will nonetheless find a project to do with the money because we never leave federal funds on the table. That project may or may not actually be within the Boston region. Just so everybody understands, this isn't Boston statewide funds. This is statewide funds that MassDOT controls, or federal funds that MassDOT controls, and that we bring to the MPOs as appropriately when we decide we want to do projects within various regions. Did I explain it for you?
Yeah, I guess what I really was getting at though is like how little of a pause can we put in the process and not affect what's going to be spent this year. Yeah, I guess I don't want to completely put the monies that are assigned, that are allotted to it, for this fiscal year in jeopardy. But we'd like to just have a little more time, to get the other side of the story on this.
Right, but so no one can answer that question, because the minute you put this, assuming this amendment passes, this project is therefore in jeopardy in the sense of, if we don't convince enough MPO members that we've solved the issues they care about, this project will just either die on the vine, or will have to be put back in the queue, or will be done with non-federal aid possibly. But so there's no guarantee that we're pausing for a couple of months, because once you take it out, in order to get it back in, enough MPO members have to be convinced that it's an appropriate project. So voting to take it out takes it out until we convince whatever the number of members of a majority is that it's appropriate to move forward again.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions or comments on this issue or any others related to the amendment? Seeing none. So again, we're going to move the amendment as presented today, and then we will take any other motions once we get that amendment on the table. So can I get a motion in a second to approve this amendment as presented today, please? So I see Brian Kane has his hand up. Can you unmute Brian, please?
I move to release the amendment. Is that what we're doing, David? Releasing the amendment?
We are approving this one.
I move to approve this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there a second? Unmute John Romano, will you?
I second Brian's motion.
Thank you. Discussion or amendment on that amendment? Sheila?
Propose an amendment on the amendment to remove the project.
Yep, and for the record, that is 608, 611.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's a motion to delete project number 608, 611 from this amendment. Is there a second? And I see Leonard Diggins has his hand up.
Yes, I'm going to second it. I really want to discuss it, and I think I'll just stop there. Thank you.
All right, so that motion being made and seconded, we will now debate the motion. John Romano, you have your hand up?
Oh, no.
Oh, you didn't have, yeah, you had your hand up to second, okay. Anybody want to debate or discuss this motion? Please raise your hand. Lynn?
So I did ask, I did ask a question. So these polls, we're going to have these polls statewide, these high polls statewide?
John Bouchard.
I've been unmuted. Now I'm unmuted. No, what I had stated is that the existing infrastructure has been in place for a long time. As we conduct inspections of our existing infrastructure statewide, we have found some of the poles to be deteriorating, and as a result, we've made a conscious decision to upgrade lighting systems in different parts of the state as a result. And a lighting analysis is done to determine the appropriate lighting system to be installed, the height of pole, et cetera, et cetera. So this particular one is the one we're talking about, but we're using data statewide to determine that the existing infrastructure has started to show failure, and we're concerned about public safety.
Right, I asked the question in a kind of sloppy way. I guess my question is, to what extent, for poles that you are going to replace, that they will replace with these high poles in other locations that have the same kind of issue that at least we're presented with.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all of your questions. You cut out once.
John, let me try and answer that. I think answers Lynn's question, but then you correct me if I say anything wrong. So here's what I believe, Lynn. We are replacing these poles as part of the light project. So as we're doing light projects across the Commonwealth, where we have these old types of poles that we've realized are degrading over time, we will replace them with these new poles. But we're not doing projects systematically necessarily to go out and replace all of the poles. Is that right, John?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Lynn, does that explain it?
No, I understand that. I understand that you're not replacing all the poles, but of the poles that you are replacing, are they getting replaced with these high poles? And even if you say you're not replacing all with high poles, I'm then asking, in places that you do replace them with high poles, are they or in places that we might have the same problem that we're having here in Canton?
So we are replacing, as we do light projects where they have these existing types of poles that we've realized are degrading, we are, as part of that light project, replacing them with the higher poles.
Okay.
Part of the concern specifically in this location is it's the Blue Hills. So while there may be concerns with light pollution other places as we do these replacements, the Blue Hills has magnified that concern in this case. Okay?
Gotcha. I have a couple more questions, but I'm going to stop for now and let other people ask questions and then maybe come back. Thank you.
Okay. Sheila?
I'm going to let other people speak.
Okay, I'll come back to you and Lynn later. Daniel?
Oh, sure. Thank you. I think or I want to point out that it seems the other concern about this project in this particular location in relation to the Blue Hills was also about the kind of lighting, or the high brightness of the lighting, the number of Kelvin and so on, and how that the type of lighting that was being installed is also not or was problematic for the Blue Hills based on the public comments. So I guess I just want to point out that's another issue, not simply the light poles or the replacement light poles themselves. And I think that's where there is a concern that has not, based on the public comments, has not adequately been addressed.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. David Coase?
Yeah, I think my question is similar to what Daniel just asked. Is the concern the height of the pole itself, or is it more the strength of the lighting fixture that's going to be attached to that pole? And we're not experts in lighting and in poles, but are there different types of fixtures that can be attached to that taller pole, or is there anything that can be done with additional review to improve the fixture that's going to be attached to that higher pole?
Right. So I will try to answer the first question, and please, members of the public, if I misstate something you've said, please feel free to raise your hand. I believe the concern is with both the increased height of the poles and the change in the type of light being used, the kelvins and all of those things that I frankly just barely understand. So I believe it is both. For want of a better word in layman's terms, the light's too bright, and because it's higher up, it's diffusing over too large of an area, is what I sort of, in my layman's terms, believe is the discussion. I don't have anywhere near the capability to answer the question of are there other solutions. John Bouchard, do you have anything else you'd like to add on this point at this time?
The only alternatives that were considered for this was the current system and a no-build alternative. There were no other, based on the analysis that we did, those were our only two options.
So on that, then I assume then there's a chance that if the MPO takes this out, and we can't convince the MPO to do the project as we've scoped it, we may just walk away and spend our money on a different project. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I am saying.
Thank you, John. Tom Bent.
Hi, David. I just wanted to chime in a little bit because this is what I actually do for a living. I'm an electrical contractor.
You're an expert. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's a, and I understand what they're talking about. A couple of questions that I would want to find out when we can is, I understand the poles are higher, and their issue is the spread of light. That would be determined by what type of distribution level is that the poles have been set up for, as far as inside of the fixture. There's all types of distribution levels that can be done, and that will either extend the light out or narrow the light down. As far as the Kelvin rating, I know 4,000 K seems to be the standard that is out there for street lighting. That sometimes on those fixtures, that is adjustable depending on the fixture type. The Kelvin rating and the as far as the color, and as far as the, basically, I'm going to say wattage of the lights. So those might be a couple of questions if we can get answers on at some point that might help the discussion and help the community that's concerned about this.
Thank you, Tom. For those of you from the public who have raised your hand, we will call on you. I like to call on MPO members first, but please keep your hand raised. I do see you. Ken Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, is there existing high mast lighting there now?
Of the lighting is, I don't know what the size of the lighting is now. I do know that there are 10 new 150-foot high, tall height mast structures to be installed with 10 LED luminaires. I don't know, there are 90 light fixtures out there now, and they're on Cobra style, but I haven't been unable to find the height and information on the existing system.
All right, so just so people understand, we're not talking about raising, the light pole on the side of the road from, 25 feet to 35 feet. We're talking about getting rid of all the roadside luminaires and installing these 150-foot tall, what's called high mast lighting. And I'm not sure the whole point of it is to get a road hazard away from the side of the road and install these high mast poles that are in the middle of the interchange and can light the whole interchange. And that's the point of them. Now, whether they can be focused or not, I have no idea. But it's not that they're just raising these roadside poles a few feet. It's replacing roadside poles with these 150-foot tall fixtures that are in the middle of the interchange and light the whole interchange. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Lynn?
So based on Ken's response just then, is it a deficiency issue, or is it a safety issue, or is it both?
John?
It's both. It's a safety and a deficiency issue. There's not proper lighting, needs an upgrade, and we are trying to remove and go to a system that that we're using statewide that provides better illumination and increased safety.
Okay, and so you say if this doesn't go through, you're not doing replacement of any of the sufficient lighting. You won't have the ability to do that.
That's correct.
Okay, and one more question. The energy draw, the statement is that these take more energy. Is that indeed the case? And if so, is there something we can do to minimize that or reduce that? That may be a question also for Tom Ben. Thank you. That's going to be it for me.
Thanks. John, you have an answer?
Yeah, all I know is that we're proposing LED luminaires, which would indicate to me, just from my lighting knowledge, that we'd be drawing less energy. The comments that were made that we're increasing the energy draw by tenfold. I'm sorry, I just can't find that in our records at this time.
Thank you, John. Any other members before I start calling on the public? Seeing none, I'll take in the order I see your hands. Steve Olenoff?
Right. So the problems here are all of the above. It's the height, and when you have that height, the light is going to spread out more, and it's the color of the light also. But I've encountered this before. When lights are too bright, the solution is they say, "Oh, we'll put shields up." Well, what does that do? It just, the light is the same. It just reflects or absorbs the light in the shield or reflects it back on the road, making it even brighter. The energy use is still the same. The total energy used would be greater. And the reason it would be greater, even though you're using LED lights, which should reduce the amount of light by like something like 85%, is because the lights are so tall, you need more lights, brighter lights, to get down to that extra distance from the 100 and whatever feet down instead of the 30 feet that you had before. So it's the color is the problem. It's the amount of energy being used that's the problem. It's the fact that I don't think they've really thought this out. As Tom Ben said, yeah, there are ways where the lighting could be properly aimed and directed in a better way, but that obviously is not happening here. The diagrams we showed were just lights were just like 360 degrees, and the only way they're using is shields to cut out where in that 360 degree period, which is most of the light, just being wasted, and reflecting that back down, trying to get it down on the roadway only. So there's a much better ways to do this. Certainly, MassDOT can do a better job on this. They can come back with a better project. They have to maintain these lights one way or the other anyway. So whether it's to just replace the heads and any necessary poles which are old and deteriorated, just replace them. I don't think safety is a big issue here. I don't see these poles getting knocked down. I've been driving through there for years. I think that if we eliminate this from the tip at this time, that'll force MassDOT to do a better job. And I'm sure they can do a better job on it than they're doing here. They've just gone through and say, okay, let's just throw up the light, big lights, and do it. And remember, brighter is not better. We don't want brighter lights. Right now, the brightness is fine. Bright light will just make it less safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So I'm going to take the public comments again and then get back to the MPO members so we can eventually get to a decision. Emily Teller?
I was just about to remove my name. I have heard about full shielded cutoff lights because those are what we should be installing everywhere so that glare doesn't spread. But I think the intent at this intersection is to light up the whole intersection. I hope that you go back to the drawing board for this because we have car lights. So they're contributing something to the intersection. It doesn't seem to me that we need to be lighting up remote intersections. I'm a dark skies person anyway, and I think we're just putting too much light into the world instead of taking some out. But there you go. I hope this amendment to remove it passes.
Thank you, Ms. Teller. Heather Klisch?
Oh, sure. Thanks. This is Heather Klisch from the Appalachian Mountain Club. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I also just want to point out, I clearly hope that this project gets revisited, that the environmental review, in my view, should happen on the whole area of impact, not just on the site specific. That's where some alarm was raised, by me and our organization, that's where the environmental impact is happening in the spillover area, not just the construction site specific impacts. I'll also throw out, in case anybody didn't have a chance to look at my written comments, that it's so relevant to this project and perhaps other highway lighting projects that it was just in the last couple of weeks that the Illuminating Engineering Society and the International Dark Skies Association came out with some principles for responsible lighting that include using only what's necessary, include having no brighter than necessary. And I would encourage MassDOT, and kind of all projects to be evaluated along those lines of how can the impact be minimized, reduced, so that it is meeting, especially in a place like the Blue Hills Reservation, meeting the ecosystem needs as well.
Thank you. Kelly Beatty.
Brian. Thank you very much. And first, let me try to address something that Tom Bent mentioned about light distribution. These are the proposed lights have a type 0 distribution, which means they basically cast a circular pool of light. And you're absolutely right that there are different lighting distributions, and especially the existing lighting infrastructure can have lights that cast more light, up and down along the roadway than is there now. LEDs are really good at that. And for Mr. Bouchard, I hope to work with you, and so I don't want to, be against you, but rather with you. But I'm alarmed and a little concerned that MassDOT is proposing to use this kind of one-size-fits-all solution for all replacement lighting projects in the Commonwealth. It's not just about Blue Hills, it's about your approach that these high-mast lights are the way to go. I get that they are easier for you in MassDOT. There are fewer poles, they're off the roadway, you've got 87 lights there now. The downside is that it's not environmentally or energy efficiently or even initial cost-wise the best solution. And I would think that you would have looked at actually replacing your deteriorating poles right now, and I suspect it would be at far less cost. So I hope that's one of the things you look at going forward, because there are more solutions to these lighting problems than just high-mast lighting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Franny Osmond?
Yeah. Oops. I was just wanting to sort of repeat what I think Len might have hinted at, that once you do figure out your opinions about this particular lighting project, to please go back. If this is part of a statewide light project, please make use of this, focus on this one, and look at all of them and see what can be applied, and especially looking at, as the AMC person said, at the environment around it, not just the place, the location. But just to make this conversation have a wider impact on all of the lighting projects.
Thanks, Franny. Paul Dale?
Can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Oh, thank you very much. So one other thing that I just learned here is that if we elect not to move forward with this project, the money would then be available to be spent on other projects, perhaps elsewhere in the state. And in that regard, I'd like to note that Mass DOT is keenly aware of the need to address transportation issues related to the Global Warming Solutions Act. So I tried very hard to find any reports about safety issues associated with this particular intersection. I couldn't find any. So with all the discussion about how much lighting do we need, I question whether there's a significant safety issue here that would overrule the use of perhaps using the funds to address the much larger problem that we face, and which is the emissions problems that come and reduction in transportation emissions generally within the state. So all funds are appreciated for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other comments or questions? Any other discussion from MPO members before we call the roll? Seeing none, we're now going to call the roll on a motion to delete project number 608611 from the tip. Jonathan, call the roll.
David Moeller,
No.
John Bouchard,
John?
John Bouchard, no.
John Romano,
No.
Samantha Silverberg,
No.
Laura Gilmore,
Laura Gilmore votes no.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, no.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Kaz is no.
Jim Fitzgerald,
No.
Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz,
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
Sheila Page,
Yeah, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Austin Saganowitz, yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. I believe it was 13-8, but staff will document it for the record. So that motion carries. So now I need a motion in a second to approve the TIP amendment as amended today. And to be clear, project 608611 is no longer funded in the TIP amendment. Can I get a motion in a second, please? Daniel Amstutz?
Daniel Amstutz, so moved to approve as amended.
Thank you. Tina Cassidy?
And I second that motion.
Thank you very much. Call the roll, please, Jonathan.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
Yes.
John Romano,
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
Yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Kaz is yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz,
Daniel Amstutz, yes.
Sheila Page,
Yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion
That
carries.
motion carries. Thank you all very much. I'd like to thank the members of the public for their strong involvement. Next item on the agenda, I believe, is TIP Amendment 4. Is that correct? Transit Amendment 4. TIP Amendment to the Transit. Yep, number 4. Matt, are you handling this?
Yes, I will obviously just start with a thank you to Samantha from the MBTA for giving an overview of this earlier in today's meeting. So with that in mind, I will sort of briefly just recap what's in Amendment 4, and then obviously folks can ask follow-up questions if needed, so that we're all on the same page. Again, the aim today is to release TIP Amendment 4 or Amendment 4 to the fiscal years 2020 through 24 TIP for public review. And that public review period, if released, would mirror the same public review period for the draft fiscal years 2021 through 25 TIP. So again, much like TIP Amendment 3 did for highway programming, TIP Amendment 4 aligns the MBTA's 2020 through 24 programming with their proposed 2021 through 25 allocations. This alignment will allow the MBTA to move forward with making its final obligations to projects and programs in fiscal year 20, which is the current fiscal year. So there are two tables posted to the MPO meeting calendar that outline these changes in detail. And I will also note here that there are additional tables posted detailing the MBTA's proposed programming for fiscals 21 through 25. Again, that's the new TIP. So the first amendment table for Amendment 4 shows the proposed new year-over-year funding levels for each of the MBTA's programs, including stations and facilities, bridges and tunnels, buses, revenue vehicles, and signals and systems. The table mirrors the draft programming, again, that's included in fiscals 21 through 25. And again, that's the TIP that was voted out earlier today for public review. So the second table that's posted for Amendment 4 compares the proposed totals presented in the first table, the draft updated programming, to the most recent federal fiscal years 2020 to 2024 TIP that was endorsed by the MPO. So fiscal year 20 was adjusted to reflect the projects that the MBTA expects to incorporate into FTA grants during the rest of fiscal 20 based on project readiness. And then fiscal years 21 through 24 were adjusted to be consistent with the projected allocations in the 21 through 25 TIP. In terms of total FTA formula funds, fiscal year 20 has increased to reflect the carryover of fiscal year 19 funds. So federal fiscal years 21 through 24 are lower than initially projected due to a reduction in 5337 formula funds received in fiscal 20, which is then carried forward into the subsequent years as well. For other FTA funding programs, the Green Line extension increase in funding is due to $150 million of $150 million rather of fiscal year 2019 funds being carried forward into fiscal 2020. The ferry grant funding is likewise carried forward from fiscal 19 into fiscal 20. There's also some railroad rehabilitation and improvement financing, which has been increased to include automatic train control and fiber resiliency, in addition to positive train control, and is based on the current drawdown schedule for these programs in the coming fiscal years. The changes in annual TIP program amounts are based on project readiness and the current draft fiscal 21 to 25 CIP, which is actively under development. The only significant reduction that's shown in the amendments is for signals and systems, which is due primarily to a change in funding for the ATC Northside project from FTA formula funds to an RRIF loan. These funds were then subsequently reallocated to other TIP programs, such as revenue vehicles, bridges and tunnels, and stations and facilities. So that's sort of a quick recap of the ground that Samantha covered earlier. And that's all I have on Amendment 4. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair for questions.
Thank you, Matt. Are there questions from the members? Again, this is just this is an amendment that we've actually already voted the substance out when we voted the TIP out. So are there any questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second from members to approve this TIP amendment as presented today? Brian Kane. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not to approve it, it's to release it for a 21-day public review process. I'm sorry. Brian?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Eric Barassa?
I second that.
Motion being made and seconded, please call the roll, Jonathan.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
Yes.
John Romano,
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
Yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Higgins, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Kansas, yes. John.
sure, Jim Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Daniel Amstutz. Oh, has he left? I think he left.
I believe he has.
Sheila Page,
Yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Tina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is, I assume the LRTP, but yep. So there's an amendment to the LRTP. Ann McGann?
Okay. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Great.
Yes.
Okay. So today we're going to be voting on Amendment 1 to the MPO's Long Range Transportation Plan Destination 2040. And this is to provide consistency with the federal fiscal years 2020 to 24 TIP amendment and the new 21 to 25 TIP. Okay. Matt, is this not
Not working for you. I can do it.
there? Okay. So this LRTP amendment included a change in funding to the major infrastructure projects included in the plan. So just as a reminder, a major infrastructure project as defined by the Boston MPO is twofold. First, it includes projects that change the capacity of the transportation system. And this is required by federal legislation, and it triggers an air quality conformity determination. Second, it includes projects that cost more than $20 million. This is a Boston MPO requirement only. You voted to continue to include these projects in the major infrastructure program last fall. And as a note, staff, as we've talked about before, staff will be coming back to you in the upcoming meeting to revisit this $20 million requirement based on discussions that we've been having over the past few meetings. We will want to make this decision on the major infrastructure definition prior to finalizing the TIP criteria revisions, which we are which are being done by investment program. So next slide. So this amendments that are in the 2024 TIP amendment, the 21 to 25 TIP, that have a cost increase that now meet or are close to the LRTP's $20 million threshold. They include the rehabilitation of the Mount Auburn Street in Watertown, which is increasing from $15 million to $28 million. The Route 126 project in Ashland, which is increasing from $16 million to just under $20 million. And the reconstruction of Ferry Street in Everett, which increased from $16 million to $25 million. Matt, the next slide.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay here, it would seem.
Great, thanks. So in addition, we updated costs for major infrastructure projects that are already included in the LRTP. It's the reconstruction of Route 1A in Walpole, the reconstruction of Rutherford Ave in Boston, the new Boston Street Bridge in Woolburn, and the bridge replacement project on Route 27 in Natick. Next slide. So the only change in the document from what was posted on March 30th for public review was to revise the investment categories identified in Table A1 for the 3 new projects that were added to the LRTP. Originally, they were noted as complete street projects, and Matt and staff has revised them to be major infrastructure / complete street projects. And this is how the Western Ave project in Lynn that was already included in the plan was identified. So the LRTP amendment was out for a 21-day public comment period. We received 1 comment letter from Mayor Curtatone in Somerville, thanking MassDOT for restarting the McGrath Highway project development process, which will implement recommendations in the LRTP. So today we're asking that you vote to endorse this LRTP Amendment 1. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, back to the chair.
Thank you, Ann. Questions for Ann? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second? Please raise your hands to make the motion. This is a motion and a second to approve this as presented. Austin Siginowitz. Can somebody unmute?
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Eric Barassa.
I second the motion.
Motion being made and seconded. Please call the roll, Jonathan.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
Yes.
John Romano,
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Dickens, yes.
Tom Kadzis,
Yes.
Jim Fitzgerald, Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Sheila Page,
Sheila Page, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Siganowitz,
Yes.
Thatcher Keyser. I think, did you say yes, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Gina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can you put the agenda back up, please? Thank you. Next item is FY 2020 Unified Planning Work Program Amendment. Sandy Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members. I think we'll have the amendment text up on the screen in a moment. I am here today to ask the MPO to approve Amendment 1 to the Federal Fiscal Year 2020 UPWP. You'll recall that you voted this amendment out for a 21-day review period at the March 26th MPO meeting. We received no comments on this amendment. Just to recap briefly, this amendment authorizes $120,000 in an additional budget line in the FFY 2020 UPWP that will fund the CTPS strategic plan process, which you heard an update on from Tegan in her executive director's report. The funding comes from carryover FFY 2019 Section 5303 funds. The CTPS strategic plan is the first step in the development of an MPO operations plan as recommended by the 2019 Federal Certification Review. I'm happy to take any questions at this time. If there are none, I hand it back to the chair for a motion to approve the amendment.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments at this time from MPO members? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second to approve? Please raise your hand so we can unmic you. Tina Cassidy.
Make a motion to approve.
Lynn Diggins.
An enthusiastic second.
Thank you, Lynn. Motion being made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
Yes.
John Romano,
Yes.
Samantha Silverberg,
Yes.
Laura Gilmore,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
Yes.
Brian Kane,
An enthusiastic yes.
Leonard Higgins,
Thank
Yes. Leonard.
Tom Kazis,
Yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Jay Monty,
Yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Sheila Page,
Yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Austin Saganowitz,
Yes.
Thatcher Keyser,
Thatcher Keyser votes yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Tina Cassidy,
Gina Cassidy, yes.
Jennifer Constable,
Jennifer Constable, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item is member announcements. Do any members have any announcements at this time? Seeing none, when's our next MPO meeting? I know we briefly went over the changes in the May dates, but can you tell us again?
I can. It will be 2 weeks from now, so May 14th.
Okay, and then also on May 28th, is that correct?
Also on May 28th, yes.
Okay, so then I should also note for everybody that we are tentatively releasing our capital improvement plan for MassDOT at the board meeting on May 11th. And I believe the Boston MPO staff will be hosting a regional forum to discuss that document on May 21st. Any other items come before the board at this time? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? Brian Kane.
To adjourn.
Tina Cassidy.
I will enthusiastically second that.
Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much, and I'll see you on the 14th, if not before. Take care, everybody.